Hi, I'm Mark Palmer. Welcome to Reimagining Law. Today I'm joined by Aaron Brooks of Brooks Law and Consulting in Naperville, Illinois, and Joe Kurlinkus from Kurlinkus Law in Roscoe, Illinois. Before we jump in, I want to remind our viewers to like this video and subscribe to our channels for new episodes. So with all the news of companies and government entities getting hacked and attacked by ransomware, I wanted to go and get some thoughts from these two experts, particularly as it concerns the legal profession. So, Aaron, let's set the stage a bit. What happens when you get hacked? What's going on here?
So if you're looking at it from the perspective of a hacker, the hacker has somehow gained unauthorized access to your information. So maybe they've intercepted an unencrypted email, or they have brute force, or kind of a fancy word of saying that they've guessed your password to an online account, like your email account, or maybe you've handed it to them. That's what we call phishing, and you get an email that says, "Hey, you have a fax. Hey, you have a voicemail. Click here to log in," and you enter your username and password, and you've just handed over your credentials for the account, and that's another way of being hacked. You could ask the same question: what is it? What happens when you get hacked from the perspective of the person? The person who's been hacked. And the scary answer to that, what may happen is nothing. You may not notice it, and so this is a reason that we deploy intrusion detection systems, and we do active monitoring to see if there's unauthorized access to the system.
Now, many times we see in the news a lot of discussion on these small amounts, but many times large amounts of ransom, sometimes being paid, sometimes being refused to be paid, be it a company or be it a government entity and the like. What have you heard about whether you should pay a ransom? Is that a good idea, or what factors go into that evaluation?
I think the problem with that is that it's going to depend on your data, what data you've got, what data you need to have. Even if you have backups, how fast those can get back up online. When Colonial Pipeline, that was the one that was fairly recent here that sort of shut down the East Coast. They made the decision to pay that ransom, 4.4 million, because that was something they needed to have up and running immediately. With a smaller firm that maybe you do have backups, or you have your documents are stored elsewhere. Maybe you don't need to have those immediately available to you, or maybe you do have those immediately available. So it's all going to depend on what you need, and then also with the insurance too. Right now these are very lucrative. $4.4 million for a little bit of work on the side of the hackers. As long as those keep being paid out, they're going to continue to go forward with this. And that's the issue right now we're seeing across the world, I think, at this point. As long as you continue to pay those out, or they continue to be paid out, you're going to have those problems.
I just wanted to follow up on that briefly. And Aaron, I want to hear, what do you see if people have proper data backups? Is that like the main protection, or can they just turn to the ransom holder and say, well, that's great, you have that data, but I have a backup, so have a nice day, goodbye? Is that enough?
Yeah. Well, it depends on what you mean by proper backup, but that definitely is the solution, is to not have it happen. And so you have to really, really carefully think through your backup and disaster recovery plan, and kind of brainstorm, that you have to understand the nature of ransomware and how it can sort of sit like a time bomb inside of a backup. So just because you have data backed up doesn't mean you haven't also backed up the ransomware time bomb. And the flip side of that is you have to constantly test your backups. It's not enough to say, yeah, we do backups. If you haven't actually done a disaster recovery drill and you've actually restored your backed up data, then you don't have a backup, or at least you can't prove it. The other thing I want to mention, if it does turn out that you have critical data that you absolutely need to restore, and paying the ransom to get the encryption key is the only option that you have, I would note two things. First of all, the insurance, as was mentioned, you have to do that in coordination with your carrier. That's not something you should be unilaterally doing, because you're going to have to go through the loss process that your insurance carrier provides. So you can't just pay the ransom and then come back and expect to collect insurance remuneration. And the other thing I want to point out is that last fall, the OFAC did issue an advisory warning against making ransomware payments, and because it is a national security issue, and so you're going to have to work with the federal government. You're going to have to make notifications, not just your insurance carrier and the appropriate officials in the federal government, but this is also probably going to be a breach notification issue. So you're going to have to notify clients and other attorneys, things like that.
So let's talk about prevention. What's the main thing you can do if you're an attorney watching this video? Where do I begin, Aaron?
Sure. So, and I do webinars on cybersecurity. So I just did a couple for the DCPA. If you're a member, you can look at those, or ISBA, you can look at those. But to very briefly summarize it, what I normally like to tell people is that you have to operate your information security program in a framework way, with a framework mentality. So what that means is you can't sort of in a scattershot brainstorming way think of everything you need to be thinking about. You need to use a security framework like the NIST cybersecurity framework, which is a globally recognized national best practice kind of checklist. And you have to do security risk assessment. So you take a framework like NIST, you work through it step by step by step by step, and you ask the hard questions, and you give the answers that are uncomfortable. Like I just said, have we done a disaster recovery drill for our backup in the last month? No. What about the last year? No. What about ever? Those are difficult questions to ask and answer, but you got to be brutally honest and say, okay, we've got some remediation to do here, and then you got to do that work.
Yeah. Joe, what can you add?
Talk to your IT person, understand what they are saying. That's the biggest thing I've seen with different attorneys I've worked with and with different smaller firms. We don't have a big, huge IT department. Maybe the partners aren't that tech savvy. They do the law. They don't do the IT. Make sure you can have your advisor, your tech advisor, explain what all of this means to you, what the backup is, where it is, not just, oh yeah, we're backing it up to offsite, NAS, whatever. Make sure that you understand those words that they're explaining it to you. And take it seriously. Listen to them, make them explain it to you. If you don't understand it, you need somebody else to help explain it to you. You need another firm, another IT department, another IT consultant.
Yeah, we certainly constantly hear that the human factor is always continually the biggest risk, and you need to address that first and understand what's going on on your desktop and your employees and your staff at the same time. The legal profession obviously deals in a lot of private information consistently. So it's not just the backups, but it's securing that information and getting out in the world and having control of it, because we have that duty to our clients every day, day in, day out. So, well, thank you, Aaron and Joe, for joining me for this session. Thank you to all of you for watching. Please like and share and subscribe to our channel for more information. We'll have some information down below on how to stay connected and how to connect with Aaron and Joe as well. Thank you for watching.